some trouble too.
Tell us again then, what do you think will happen at your wife's funeral?
Without any hesitation, without any fear of contradiction, I know it will happen. God is going to raise her up just prior to the lowering of the coffin. She will be alive again. I don't know exactly how, I can't tell you that, but she is going to come alive, and the world is going to see the resurrection of a human being.
Did you and your other friends murder your wife?
No way. We didn't touch her. My wife.
Well, you just said you did touch her a number of times.
No, we didn't. Not my wife. We touched the spirit.
You had to touch your wife to get to them, though.
Well, the body of my wife possibly, yeah, but at those times she was not my wife.
The post-mortem has revealed internal injury.
Yeah, that's something I'm a little bit puzzled about that one. I don't quite understand where they should come from. So 3 or 4 people already asked me, and the only explanation I can give for that one, because how can we do any internal injury? We can't. Is that while the spirits were being extracted, they were hanging on so hard at times. It was almost, we couldn't almost shift them at all. Like, they were just tearing inside on her. I don't think I'll go back to my wife, but my wife's going to be fine, and I'm sure she'll be more than welcome.
We would like to come on Friday.
I really pray that you would.
Because of the police investigation. It could be a hold-up.
It probably would be all right by today, but they couldn't surely. I only talked to the people about it yesterday, because they said I wasn't going to arrange to get it organised.
Right. Just in case they release it.
Well, they thought they would release it today, yeah. Well, I'm going to Horsham. I'll leave you about 2 o'clock.
Yes.
I'll be in Horsham probably for 2 or 3 hours. Come back here for lunch, have a tea, and then I'll be staying right back overnight.
Right, okay. Good. Well, we'll leave you fine. We won't believe you, but that'll be fine. We'll know that's right.
Well, you always be, it might be easy for you to ring the funeral parlour. You always get there.
Yes, who's handling it?
Rather than...
What do you think will happen here at your wife's funeral?
Well, I don't believe anything at all will happen here at the church. I believe it would just be a brief services to what I'm to give them to understand. We will then go to the cemetery, and I believe that's just where it's going to happen, at the cemetery. But I don't know exactly at what point. I couldn't say. It's just guesswork when I'm saying, moments before. I did have some sort of feeling on that, but I could be wrong on that. It might be as we're walking in, as the coffin's been carried in, or whatever. I don't know, but it will happen there.
You haven't had any doubts over the past few days that perhaps someone's told you the wrong thing?
No way. No, in fact, if anything, my faith has been strengthened.
Why is that?
In that area, I believe even stronger now than I did perhaps a few days ago that it would happen, sure. Because again, we have had some more promises, only scriptural ones, where the Lord has given us Bible readings that again confirmed that she is going to be raised up again.
for the old order has passed away. Let us be still and know that God is real, and he will deliver us from the fear of death, for there is victory in Jesus. From her place in the Horsham Corps of the Salvation Army to the home prepared for her in heaven, we now commit her body to the grave, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, in the certainty of the resurrection to eternal life through our Lord Jesus Christ. And the lovely words of the psalmist, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be a shadow of death. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff. The Lord bless you and keep.
Gone to heaven now, do you think?
Yes, she has gone to heaven. She is in heaven.
Why do you think she didn't resurrect as she said she would?
Maybe she didn't want to come back. It was so beautiful up there, she probably decided and convinced Almighty Lord that she did not want to come back. She just wanted to stay with him.
Have you given up hope of seeing your wife again?
Oh, no, way at all. Not at all. I will see her again and there'll be rejoicing. But it's not going to be today as I thought it was going to be. It will be another day.
Do you still think that deliverance was a good idea?
Yes, it was, because had she not been delivered, her place would not have been secured in heaven. Her place is secure. She's with the Lord.
Well, thank you.
Are you still putting your trust in God to see you through this time?
My very word, yes. Very much so indeed.
Have you?
Yes.
What have you been doing to get you through this?
We've been doing a lot of praying And we had a time of praying this morning too, and we feel very much at peace with the Lord. Thank you very much.
What are you doing as far as the court case goes? Are you going to fight it, or?
I can't answer that one. But we are, of course, completely innocent. And it will be proven. There's no doubt about that.
Have you been praying to your wife, or?
I've been praying to her, you mean?
Well.
No, not to her. I've been praying to the Lord, not to my wife. Thank you.
How are you feeling today?
Very well, thank you.
Have you been praying this morning?
Indeed, yes. Yes, we had a time of prayer.
Are you surprised to find yourself back here again?
No, not really.
So what are your hopes for today then, and for the rest of this?
My hopes for today and for the rest of this, that God's will be done. Right back.
TV, old buddy. Make sure he doesn't fall over the seat. Right?
Okay. So you stayed with the member of the Hunters last night? Yeah.
This goes with this goes.
Morning, Ralph. A beautiful day.
Yes, it is lovely, isn't it? For sure.
Ralph.
Hey, Jack?
Oh, yeah.
How you doing?
Good.
That's all right.
Good day, this.
You're going to do something else.
Yeah, I thought it was for Charlie. Well, Kennedy says there's no pressure, so
Yeah,
so you
that's
can't
right.
do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking.
The tiny community of Antwerp and left homicide detectives wondering if any charges should be laid. Joan died of internal injuries last Saturday in the isolated farmhouse after a 4-day exorcism. 22-year-old Matthew Nuske of Warrantite conducted the final stage of the exorcism but refused to comment today.
No comment, sorry.
Police say it was Nuske's first attempt at a human exorcism. He is a greenkeeper at the Ringwood Golf Course.
We don't want to make any comments at all, so that's Matthew's personal business.
Nuske is a member of the Heathmont Baptist Church. Senior church officials from Heathmont Baptist said today they do not condone the way the exorcism was carried out and say Matthew Nuske did not learn the process at this church. The exorcist sped away as we tried to speak to him at the church. Other mainstream churches say the exorcism was not carried out correctly.
Jesus Christ just simply spoke the word and the persons were delivered from the power of demons. There's really no biblical ground for any physical pressure to be placed on the person's body.
Joan's husband Ralph says he still believes she'll be raised back to life at her funeral tomorrow. Dean Alan Craig, 7 News.
Life exorcism. Is casting out demons a health hazard? A Victorian pig farmer whose wife died in the name of God relives the bizarre ceremony for our cameras.
That's real life, following 7 Nightly News.
"54-year-old pig farmer Ralph Vollmer invited all the media to his wife's funeral in Horsham today, believing God had told him she would be raised back to life. He still believed it this morning.
We have had some more promises, only scriptural ones, where the Lord has given us Bible readings that again confirmed that she is going to be raised up again.
49-year-old Joan Vollmer died last Saturday after a 4-day exorcism. The bizarre ceremony involved a 22-year-old Melbourne man running around the isolated farmhouse 7 times with a sheet of glad wrap. 4 people, including husband Ralph, told police they had to physically force 2 demons out of Joan's body. She died of internal injuries. In the streets of Horsham, everyone had an opinion about today's funeral.
Well, I don't believe in the exorcism. Well, I think you're going to be in for a big disappointment, I think.
Ralph stood motionless with his sons. He cried openly as he realised there would only be prayers and words of comfort, but no miracle, no resurrection.
We are humans and we do make mistakes, and sometimes we mistake God's voice with our own.
The homicide squad will now prepare a report for the state coroner. Homicide detectives say the mysterious death of 49-year-old grandmother Joan Vollmer is one of their most unusual cases. The isolated farmhouse at Antwerp near Dimboola became the location for a 4-day exorcism, ending only when Mrs. Vollmer died. Joan's husband Ralph, a member of the Salvation Army, called 3 friends to the house when he says she began to act aggressively. The group is a breakaway sect from the Lutheran Church. Ralph says the demon delivery took place in the kitchen, involving prayer, rebuking the devil, and what he described as massage.
The moment the spirits were released from the tongue, they just gave a final groan. Prior to that was just some hissing and some foaming around the mouth. They gave a final groan, and the moment they released, Joan was dead.
Ralph's wife died last Saturday, but he kept her in the house in searing heat until Monday, praying over her with his friends, believing she would be raised from the dead. Homicide detectives are yet to lay any charges, but are continuing to probe the mystery, and adding to the already bizarre nature of her death, husband Ralph Vollmer believes she'll be raised from the dead at her funeral.
And God is going to raise her up just prior to the lowering of the coffin.
An autopsy revealed Joan died from internal injuries.
Did you and your other friends murder your wife?
No way. We didn't touch her. My wife.
Well, you just said you did touch her a number of times.
No, we didn't. Not my wife. We touched the spirit.
You had to touch your wife to get to them, though.
Well, the body of my wife possibly, yeah, but at those times she was not my wife.
Joan Vollmer was treated for psychiatric problems 2 years ago.
Are you upset by your wife's death?
Not at all. I'm humbled and I'm honoured that God should have chosen me to be part of this wonderful, great thing that's going to happen.
Dean Allen Craig, 7 Nightly News. 54-year-old pig farmer Ralph Vollmer invited all the media to his wife's funeral in Horsham today, believing God had told him she would be raised back to life. He still believed it this morning.
We have had some more promises, only scriptural ones, where the Lord has given us Bible readings that again confirmed that she is going to be raised up again.
49-year-old Joan Vollmer died last Saturday after a 4-day exorcism. The bizarre ceremony involved a 22-year-old Melbourne man running around the isolated farmhouse 7 times with a sheet of glad wrap. 4 people, including husband Ralph, told police they had to physically force 2 demons out of Joan's body. She died of internal injuries. The records of her psychiatric problems are now in the hands of the coroner. In the streets of Horsham, everyone had an opinion about today's funeral.
I think it's ridiculous. Well, I don't believe in the exorcism. Well, I think you're going to be in for a big disappointment, I think.
The service at the Salvation Army was brief and simple. The large congregation included friends from the church and some of those involved in the exorcism. Before the funeral procession left the city centre, an officer from the church read a prepared statement distancing the Salvation Army from the fundamentalist group that performed the exorcism.
From these events, I pray that the Christian church will be put in place some safeguards and directions and root out those who will not come under the authority.
The service continued briefly at the cemetery before Joan Vollmer's body was laid to rest. Ralph stood motionless with his sons. He cried openly as he realised there would only be prayers and words of comfort, but no miracle, no resurrection.
We are humans and we do make mistakes, and sometimes we mistake God's voice with our own.
The homicide squad will now prepare a report for the state coroner. Dean Allen Craig, 7 Nightly News.
Distracted. They were hanging on so hard at times. It was almost, we couldn't almost shift them at all. Like, you know, they were just tearing inside on her. I don't think I'll go back to life, but My wife's going to be fine, and I thought it will be more long. We would like to come on Friday. I really
54-year-old Ralph Vollmer was charged with manslaughter today. His 49-year-old wife Joan died of internal injuries at their isolated farmhouse after a 4-day exorcism. 3 friends who he alleges came to his property to assist in the exorcism were also charged. 22-year-old Matthew Paul Nusky from Warrandyte, who police allege conducted the final stage of the exorcism, David Klinger from New South Wales, and Leanne Reichenbach from country Victoria. The bizarre circumstances surrounding Joan Vollmer's death, which attracted widespread publicity, led homicide detectives into a lengthy investigation of the exorcism. After her death, Ralph Vollmer, a member of the Salvation Army, claimed his wife would be brought back to life on the day of her funeral.
We have had some more promises, only scriptural ones, where the Lord has given us Bible readings that again confirmed that she is going to be raised up again.
Vollmer, Reichenbach and Klinger were arrested today and appeared in Horsham Court. Matthew Nusky was bailed in the Melbourne Magistrates Court today and ordered to report to Ringwood Police once a week. All 4 will reappear in the Horsham Court on July 21st. Lena Caneva, 7 Nightly News.
The courthouse in the Wimmera town of Horsham hasn't received so much attention for quite some time. Today, 5.5 months after 49-year-old grandmother Joan Vollmer died during a 4-day exorcism, those charged by police for their alleged involvement appeared in the local magistrates' court. Joan Vollmer's 55-year-old husband Ralph faces 1 charge of manslaughter, along with 3 friends, David Klinger, aged 29, Leanne Reichenbach, 31, and 22-year-old Matthew Nusky. All are currently on bail. It's alleged they were attempting to drive the devil from Joan Vollmer's soul in a prayer vigil as she lay on the kitchen table at their isolated farmhouse at nearby Antwerp. Police say Joan Vollmer died of internal injuries, but her husband Ralph, a member of the Salvation Army, was convinced she'd rise from the dead at her funeral. Despite his prayers, she didn't. But today Ralph said his faith in God hasn't weakened.
I believe it will only strengthen my faith, if anything else.
The focus will be on this town again when a week-long committal starts on the 13th of September. Kate Davies in Horsham, 7 Nightly News.
The death of 49-year-old Mrs. Vollmer on January the 30th resulted in 4 people charged with manslaughter.
Good morning, Ralph. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
They include her husband, 55-year-old Ralph Vollmer, along with 3 friends, David Klinger, aged 29, Leanne Reichenbach, 31, and 22-year-old Matthew Nusky. It's alleged they were attempting to drive the devil from Joan Vollmer's soul in a prayer vigil as she lay on the kitchen table of their Antwerp farmhouse. Monsignor Gerald Cudmore of the Catholic Archdiocese of Melbourne was called as an expert witness on the theory of exorcism. He told the court the church recognised demonic possession and that such a condition was cured by prayer with no physical violence used. Dr. Stanley Pilbeam, who performed the autopsy on Mrs. Vollmer, found she died after pressure was applied to her neck, fracturing a thyroid cartilage, followed by a cardiac arrest. Bruises were found on her face, legs and arms. Dr. Michael Connellan, who treated Joan Vollmer in the past, said she showed signs of hypomania causing irrational behaviour and paranoia. He'd recommended in 1990 she be made an involuntary psychiatric patient. This court case to decide if the 4 accused should be sent for trial is expected to last up to 5 days and involve more than 30 witnesses. This is Simon Breer at Horsham for 7 Nightly News. 22-year-old Matthew Nusky was called to the Vollmer farmhouse to assist with the exorcism of Joan Vollmer on the advice of his devout Christian mother. Kathleen Nusky said she believed her son was being trained by the Lord to confront the forces of evil such as Satan. Mrs. Nusky stated Matthew told her during the exorcism Joan Vollmer displayed tremendous strength, requiring 4 people to restrain her. An autopsy found Mrs. Vollmer died on January 30 from a cardiac arrest after pressure was applied to her neck. Nusky, along with Ralph Vollmer, David Klinger and Leanne Reichenbach, are charged with her manslaughter. Leanne Reichenbach's husband John told the court he and his wife had been involved in over 20 exorcisms in the past 3 years. John Reichenbach told the court he went to visit Joan Vollmer just days before she died, and it was obvious she was under the influence of an evil spirit. He said it was his belief that God desired Mrs. Vollmer be set free through the release of the demonic possession. He said he saw no need for psychiatric help or any other medical aid. A decision on whether the 4 accused will be sent to trial is expected tomorrow. This is Simon Breer in Horsham for 7 Nightly News.
Ralph Vollmer and his co-accused were overcome by relief at the decision. They'd been charged with manslaughter after Joan Vollmer died during an exorcism at her home in country Victoria in January last year. Magistrate Tim MacDonald said there was not enough evidence of sufficient weight to warrant a conviction if the case went to trial, and dismissed the charges.
Well, God's will has been done, and I just praise and rejoice in the Lord.
The Lord done it all for us.
The 4 walked free from the Horsham court amid tears and cheers after 4 days of evidence.
Well, God's will has been done, and I just praise and rejoice in the Lord.
I'm still grieving for my wife.
55-year-old Ralph, Matthew Nusky, who performed the exorcism, along with Leanne Reichenbach and David Kligner, were charged with the death of Joan Vollmer.
The Lord done it all for us.
Mrs. Vollmer, in a week-long exorcism, was tied with stockings to boards, slapped and restrained, and had pressure applied to her abdomen, neck and mouth, allegedly to release demons inside her. Magistrate Tim MacDonald formally discharged the defendants, saying the prosecution had failed to prove that the actions of one or more of the 4 had caused Joan Vollmer's death. However, sitting as coroner after the case, Magistrate MacDonald found the 4 had contributed to Mrs. Vollmer's death. After last night's decision, a relieved Ralph Vollmer and his family are now looking forward to putting their lives back together. A priority will be here at the farm, where it all began 8 months ago. Ralph was up early trying to do a few domestic duties, thoughts of his wife and the exorcism still strong.
If we hadn't have, Joan would have finished up in a mental institution for the rest of her life, and there would have been no life at all. This way I know where she is, and I know she's happy where she is.
Would he go through another exorcism?
I certainly hope not, but of course if it was God's will then I would, yeah, sure.
And despite everything, Ralph Vollmer still believes his wife will rise from the dead.
Yes, of course.
Simon Breer, 7 Nightly News. David Kligner, Matthew Nusky, Leanne Reichenbach and Ralph Vollmer face 3 charges, including manslaughter, following the death of Joan Vollmer, aged 49, at the Vollmers farm near Antwerp on the 30th of January 1993. In September last year, a magistrate dismissed murder charges, but the Director of Public Prosecutions ordered they stand trial for manslaughter. In his opening address, Peter Jones for the prosecution alleged Mrs. Vollmer died after an exorcism lasting 7 days, which involved the 4 accused. The court heard Joan Vollmer suffered hypomania, causing her to wander and become restless. The prosecutor said it wasn't a case for demonic deliverance, she was a sick woman. The Crown case intends to prove Joan Vollmer's death occurred during the alleged exorcism when pressure was applied to her neck and she died from a cardiac arrest. The 4 accused, the Crown says, were unlawful and dangerous in their behaviour, and their acts caused her death during the deliverance. The Crown alleges Mrs. Vollmer was tied up with stockings, her feet restrained on boards, she was slapped and bruised as the 4 held her down. Ralph said his wife was cold and stiff and physically dead, but he got confirmation from the Lord she was going to be resurrected. The trial is expected to last up to 5 weeks, involving over 50 witnesses. Simon Breer in Horsham for 7 Nightly News. Pastor Roger Atsey told the court the Lutheran Church believed in demonic possession and exorcism, but he was concerned over the alleged exorcism death of 49-year-old Joan Vollmer on January 30 last year. Ralph Vollmer, Leanne Reichenbach, David Kligner and Matthew Nusky have pleaded not guilty to 3 charges, including manslaughter. The court has been told the 4 accused took part in the exorcism after they decided Joan Vollmer was possessed by evil spirits. She was tied up, Pressure was allegedly applied to her neck to force out the demons. After 7 days, she died of a cardiac arrest. Pastor Atzi said, to his knowledge, physical force or physical restraint was not a part of exorcism. He said many people were concerned a woman had died as a result of their activities. A letter was sent to the Lutheran minister and others, signed by two of the accused, Leanne Reichenbach and David Klingner, 2 weeks after Mrs. Vollmer's death. The letter said, "We recognise that we can and do make mistakes." They asked for God's grace of forgiveness. They then said they were sorry. "We feel the hurt generated from the situation." Leanne Reichenbach had been excommunicated from the Lutheran Church a few months before the alleged exorcism. Earlier, counsel for the 4 accused outlined the defence case, saying each had acted in the best interests of Joan Vollmer, and it was their honest belief that she was possessed and needed help. The case is continuing. Simon Breer at Horsham for 7 Nightly News. The Horsham court heard the evidence of the Crown has not made a case of manslaughter against 24-year-old Matthew Nuske. It's been alleged Nuske and 3 others were involved in the exorcism death of 49-year-old Joan Vollmer at her Antwerp pig farm in January last year. Judge Graham Crossley instructed the jury to find Nuske not guilty of manslaughter. Judge Crossley said, "I have determined no jury could possibly return a verdict of manslaughter in Nuske's case as a matter of law." Nuske still faces 2 other charges, recklessly causing serious injury and false imprisonment. The Crown case concluded last week. The defence case has begun with an expert witness commenting on the possible cause of Joan Vollmer's death. Dr. John Kennedy, an ear, nose and throat specialist, after a study of the evidence, said Joan Vollmer's neck was massaged and stroked, leading to an extremely rare and purely accidental death. The doctor said pressure on a particular point in the neck set off a chain reaction, with signals from the brain reducing blood flow, leading to a cardiac arrest. Simon Breer in Horsham for 7 Nightly News. Father John Shanley, a Roman Catholic priest who's ordained as an exorcist, was giving evidence for the defence into the exorcism death of Joan Vollmer, in which 4 people are charged. Father Shanley told the jury he's been involved in up to 6 deliverances a week since 1978, but only 1 in 10 were seriously affected by spiritual parasites. Father Shanley said during an exorcism it was quite common for the possessed person to attack him, throw crucifixes and avoid holy oil. He said the more possessed a person is, the more violent they react. He himself has almost been strangled by his own stole up to 40 times as he prayed over the demonically possessed. It was quite usual to be suddenly grabbed by the jacket and pitched into the walls. When asked if he actively sought out possessed people, Father Shanley replied, "No, who wants to be dealing into the dark side?" He then went on to say, "I don't want to stir up trouble, but so many people want to come, and I hate to think what will happen after this publicity." Father Shanley read an article written in the 16th century called The Rite of Exorcism. It said, an exorcist must be able to distinguish between someone who is possessed or psychologically ill. The trial is continuing. Simon Breer and Horsham for 7 Nightly News. Leanne Reichenbach, aged 32, and 30-year-old David Klingner were found guilty of the manslaughter of Joan Vollmer. Mrs. Vollmer's husband, Ralph, aged 56, was found not guilty of manslaughter, but guilty of recklessly causing serious injury. Along with Matthew Nuske, all 3 were found guilty of false imprisonment. 24-year-old Nuske, who helped in the exorcism, was found not guilty on the serious injury charge. He'd earlier been cleared of manslaughter. The jury began deliberating just before 3 yesterday. Their verdict came at 3:40 today. The 10-week trial involved 36 witnesses, including police, theological and medical experts. 49-year-old Joan Vollmer died on January 30 last year after a week-long exorcism, which the defence said was to rid evil spirits from her body. She was tied up and her abdomen, chest and neck were massaged to force out the demon spirits. The Crown said Mrs. Vollmer had been suffering from a mental illness and pressure applied to her neck led to a cardiac arrest. Judge Crossley will hear pleas tomorrow before sentencing the 4. The prisoners were granted bail because of exceptional circumstances in the case and because of their apparent good character. They'll be back here tomorrow at 10. This is Simon Breer and Horsham for 7 Nightly News. The 4 prisoners were led into court for sentencing. Judge Crossley described the exorcism as an ordeal that was bizarre and quite extraordinary. Objectively, it was cruel, painful and quite horrifying. He said the 4 had shown no remorse, but that none of them had wanted to hurt or kill Joan Vollmer. Ralph Vollmer, guilty of causing serious injury to his wife during the exorcism, remains devoted to his beliefs.
No, he didn't shut my faith in any way, shape or form.
Judge Crossley sentenced Ralph to 12 months jail to be wholly suspended for 2 years. During the pleas, Judge Crossley said, "Those who pursue their religious convictions with such zeal and enthusiasm, it should be made known to these people the law will not allow such excesses in the name of religion." Leanne Reichenbach and David Klingner, who were found guilty of the manslaughter of Joan Vollmer, told Judge Crossley they'd been the subject of religious, community and social isolation because of the publicity surrounding the exorcism. Leanne Reichenbach's counsel said her parents no longer regarded her as their daughter and she's been disinherited. Her own 4 children have to be schooled at home now by her because of pressures from other children. 32-year-old Leanne Reichenbach will serve 4 months of a 2-year sentence, and David Klingner, aged 30, will go to jail for 3 months as part of an 18-month sentence. The 4th exorcist, Matthew Nuski, who's studying to be a missionary, received a suspended sentence of 3 months after being found guilty of false imprisonment. Mrs. Vollmer's grave remains unmarked at the Horsham Cemetery at the request of Ralph, despite pressure from her sisters for a headstone. This is Simon Breer in Horsham for 7 Nightly News.